Chapter 1. Saul's Unease. Saul Panzer stood in Wolfe's office with his coat still on, snow clinging like guilt. He said he didn't like the case, and Saul didn't spook easily. Christmas lights glowed outside, but his voice stayed low and grim. When Saul fears a job, it means the danger already knows your address. Wolfe closed his book and listened. I was at my desk, pretending to sort correspondence while actually watching Saul's eyebrows. When Saul's eyebrows pull together like that, something has gone wrong somewhere in the city, and it usually comes looking for us. He had not removed his hat either, which was another sign. Saul was a man who believed in hats as punctuation. Leaving one on indoors meant the sentence was unfinished. Nero Wolfe marked his place with a finger, not a bookmark, and looked up. He didn't rush. Wolfe never rushed, not even when a bomb was ticking in the basement, which had happened once, and was not an experience I cared to repeat. His eyes took in Saul, the snow, the coat, the hat, and then came to rest on Saul's face. "You are standing," Wolfe said. "That is a choice. You are also speaking in riddles. That is an offense." Saul shrugged out of the shrug that was all he allowed himself. "I came straight here. I didn't want to sit." "You will sit," Wolfe said. "Archie, a chair." I rolled my chair back with a squeak and gestured Saul into the red leather armchair opposite Wolfe's desk. Saul complied, but did not relax. He perched, coat still on, hat now placed carefully on his knee, as if it were something alive and likely to bolt. "Now," Wolfe said, folding his hands. "You do not like the case. Why?" Saul inhaled, then let it out slowly. "Because it smells wrong." "That is not an answer," Wolfe said. "It's the only one I have so far." I put in, "Saul, you've brought us cases that smelled like a fish market in August. This one must be special." "It is," Saul said. "I was hired yesterday morning by a woman named Clara Hemsley." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me, then back. "Proceed." "She's young," Saul said. "Early 30s, calm. Too calm. She lives on East 69th Street. Nice building, money, but not flashy. She wants us to find out who killed her brother." I lifted a brow. "Find out the police haven't figured it out yet?" "They've figured out plenty," Saul said. "Just not the part she doesn't like." Wolfe's fingers pressed together. "Which is?" "They think she did it." The office settled into a deeper quiet. Outside, a taxi horn bleated, muffled by snow. Inside, Wolfe's expression did not change, but I knew that particular stillness. It was the stillness of interest. "Her brother," Wolfe said. "Name?" "Leonard Hemsley, 41, financial consultant. Found dead in his office 2 nights ago. Throat cut clean, professional." I whistled softly. Holiday spirit. "Indeed," Wolfe said. "And the sister?" "Clara Hemsley was the last person to see him alive," Saul said. "They had a loud argument in his office. Several people heard it. A secretary saw her leave. Upset 40 minutes later, Leonard Hemsley was dead." Wolfe nodded once. "Circumstantial but substantial. What does the sister deny?" "She denies everything except the argument," Saul said. "She says it was about money, but not what the police think." "And what do the police think?" I asked. "They think she wanted him dead," Saul said. "There's a will, new, leaves her most of his estate." Wolfe grunted. "Motives are plentiful. Opportunity is clear. Where is the difficulty?" Saul leaned forward. "She's lying, Wolfe, but not about killing him. That got my attention properly. Care to translate?" "She's hiding something else," Saul said. "Something she's more afraid of than a murder charge." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Fear is a useful index. Why did she come to you?" She said. "She needed someone discreet," Saul said. "Someone who would look where the police wouldn't." "Which is usually where the answers are," Wolfe said. "And why did you come to me with unease instead of enthusiasm?" Saul hesitated. For Saul, that was like a trumpet blast. "Because I think the person who killed Leonard Hemsley wants us involved." I let out a short laugh. "That's flattering." "It's dangerous," Saul said. "Clara didn't find me by accident. Someone pointed her to me. Someone who knew I'd come here." Wolfe leaned back. An elaborate supposition. Not supposition, Saul said. She told me so. She said a man suggested me. She didn't know his name. He was polite, well-dressed. He said I could help her when no one else would. I frowned. That's a little on the nose. Exactly, Saul said. It's bait. Wolfe considered. If it is bait, the hook must be attractive. What did she offer? 5,000 now, Saul said. 5,000 more on resolution. Wolfe's eyes flicked again, calculating. Money alone is insufficient to attract such elaborate maneuvering. There's more, Saul said. Leonard Hemsley was involved in something big. Big enough to scare people who don't scare easy. I couldn't resist. Bigger than Saul Panzer. Saul gave me a look. Big enough to scare me. Wolfe reached for the bell cord, then paused. Archie, before we summon beer, let us hear the rest. Saul, continue. Saul nodded. Leonard had clients in places he shouldn't. Off the books. He was moving money around. Not just evasion, something else. Something criminal, Wolfe said. Yes, Saul said. But careful. Quiet. He wasn't sloppy. I leaned back. So someone careful kills him loudly enough to frame the sister. Not loudly, Saul said. Clean cut. No mess. No theft. Wolfe steepled his fingers. A display then. A message. That's what I think, Saul said. And I think the message is for us. Wolfe's mouth tightened. I do not like messages. Neither do I, Saul said. That's why I'm here. If I'm going to be in this, I want you in it. Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the decision was already made. I had seen it before. Wolfe did not often refuse a puzzle, especially one that dared him. Archie, he said, take notes, Saul. You will provide the address of Miss Hemsley and the particulars of the crime as reported. We will consider, I protested mildly. Consideration usually takes longer than that. This will take exactly as long as it takes, Wolfe said. Which is to say, not long at all. Saul, does Miss Hemsley know you are here? No, Saul said. Good, Wolfe said. I prefer my clients unaware until I have decided whether to accept them. He reached for the bell cord and pulled it. Fritz would come with beer and pretzels, the first sign that Wolfe intended to settle in. Saul relaxed a fraction, which told me he had been holding his breath since he walked in. While we waited, Wolfe said, tell me about the argument. Saul shook his head. She wouldn't say much. She said it was about a client Leonard refused to drop. A client who frightened her, Wolfe said. Yes, Saul said. She said Leonard was convinced he could control the situation. Men often are, Wolfe said dryly. The bell rang in the hall. Fritz entered with the tray, his face solemn as always, as if beer were a sacrament. He set it down and withdrew. Wolfe took his glass. Archie, on it, I said, grabbing mine. Saul declined. That was another sign. Saul did not decline beer unless his stomach was doing gymnastics. Wolfe sipped. Archie, tomorrow morning you will visit the scene of the crime. You will observe. You will listen. You will annoy the police as little as possible. Define little, I said. Less than usual, Wolfe said. He turned back to Saul. You will maintain contact with Miss Hemsley. Say nothing of this meeting. Report everything. And if someone comes calling, Saul asked. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Then we will know our supposition has merit. I finished my beer and set the glass down. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and steady, covering the city like a promise. Inside, the case had already begun to unfold. Threads drawing together toward a pattern Wolfe would one day reveal from this very desk. Saul stood, finally removing his coat. You're taking it then? Wolfe nodded, reluctantly. Saul smiled for the first time, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good. After he left, I looked at Wolfe. You really think they want us involved? I think, Wolfe said, that someone believes themselves clever. That is always an error. I gathered my notes and the sister. Wolfe picked up his book again. She is afraid. That makes her either innocent or very foolish. We will find out which. I leaned back, listening to the muted city sounds, already anticipating tomorrow's footwork. Christmas lights twinkled beyond the windows, cheerful and indifferent. Inside the brownstone, Nero Wolfe's intellect had been challenged, and that was never a comfortable position for anyone on the other side of the board. Chapter 2. The client with no cheer. The client was Harold Crane, a shipping executive with eyes too alert for the season. He claimed someone was trying to kill him before Christmas morning. Anonymous notes, silent phone calls, and a shadow that followed too closely. Wolfe disliked vague men, but he disliked panic less. He took the case because fear, like smoke, comes from fire. Crane arrived at 11 sharp, which already put him on Wolfe's favorable side. Wolfe respected punctuality, the way some men respected religion. I escorted Crane into the office and noted immediately that he was overdressed for a man seeking help and underdressed for a man accustomed to danger. His coat was expensive, but worn as if he had slept in it. His tie was knotted precisely, but his hands trembled just enough to notice if you were watching for it. He sat when I told him to and perched on the edge, spine stiff, eyes moving. He watched the door, the windows, the corners. A man expecting attack doesn't relax indoors. He just chooses which wall to put his back against. Wolfe looked him over in silence, which Crane endured poorly. After 20 seconds he cleared his throat. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "I appreciate you seeing me on such short notice." Wolfe inclined his head a fraction. "You are here because you believe your life is threatened. You will speak plainly." Crane swallowed. "Yes, I'm being watched." "By whom?" Wolfe asked. "I don't know." "That is not speaking plainly," Wolfe said. Crane spread his hands. "That's the truth. I've received notes. No name, no signature, just warnings." I leaned forward. "Warnings about what?" "About Christmas morning," Crane said. "They all mention Christmas." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Specificity is encouraging. What do the notes say?" Crane reached into his coat and produced an envelope, then hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting it to burst open. He handed it to me. I passed it to Wolfe. Wolfe did not open it immediately. "How many such notes?" "3, Crane said, "over the last 10 days. "And the phone calls?" Wolfe asked. Crane grimaced. "No one speaks. The phone rings. When I answer, there's breathing, sometimes nothing, sometimes movement." "Movement," I said. "That's poetic." "It's terrifying," Crane said sharply. Wolfe slit the envelope with a paper knife and removed a folded sheet. He read silently, lips barely moving. The note was typed, short, neat. "Christmas comes only once." Wolfe folded it again. "And the others?" "Similar," Crane said. "No threats, no demands, just reminders." "Reminders of what?" Wolfe asked. Crane hesitated too long. Wolfe's voice hardened. "Mr. Crane, if you wish my assistance, you will answer that question." Wolfe nodded. "Proceed." "I'm an executive with Crane Maritime," he said. "We handle shipping contracts, overseas sensitive routes." "Smuggling," I suggested. "No," Crane said quickly. "Not exactly." Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "There are few activities that benefit from secrecy yet remain respectable." Crane's mouth tightened. "I helped move money. Through shipping accounts, fees, adjustments." "For whom?" Wolfe asked. "I don't know their real names," Crane said. "Only intermediaries." "Convenient ignorance," Wolfe said. "It was legal," Crane insisted. "Or close enough." Wolfe made a small, dismissive sound. "Legality is not morality, and neither ensures safety. Why Christmas?" Crane looked at his hands. "Because that's when it happened." "What happened?" I asked. "A transfer," Crane said. 3 years ago, Christmas Eve, something went wrong. A junior accountant flagged the transfer." And Wolfe said. "And he disappeared," Crane said. The silence in the room deepened. "Disappeared," Wolfe repeated. You choose your words carefully. Crane looked up, eyes bright with fear. I didn't kill him. I did not accuse you, Wolfe said. But someone did. Yes, Crane said. Someone who wants me dead. Wolfe considered. Have you informed the police? Crane shook his head violently. Number God. No. They'd tear everything open, which suggests, Wolfe said, that the danger you face may be preferable to scrutiny. Crane's voice dropped. I'll pay. Wolfe waved a hand. Payment is secondary. Clarity is essential. Who else knows of this transfer? Crane hesitated. Leonard Hemsley. That name landed like a dropped plate. I looked at Wolfe. Wolfe looked at Crane. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Leonard Hemsley is dead, Wolfe said calmly. Crane's face drained of color. Dead? Yes, Wolfe said. Murdered 2 nights ago. Crane's hands began to shake openly now. Then it started, I asked. Crane nodded. Hemsley was the weak link. He wanted out. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Out of what? Out of the arrangement, Crane said. He said it was too dangerous. He wanted to come clean. Which would expose you, Wolfe said. Yes, Crane whispered. And others, Wolfe added. Crane said nothing. Wolfe folded his hands. Mr. Crane, I am already engaged in matters related to Leonard Hemsley. Your appearance here is not coincidental. Crane looked at me, then back at Wolfe. You're working on his case. Yes, Wolfe said, on behalf of his sister. Crane laughed weakly. Then I'm next. That remains to be seen, Wolfe said. Describe the shadow you mentioned. Crane frowned. A man tall, dark coat. I see him on the street, near my apartment, near my office, always at a distance. Does he approach? I asked. Number. Then how do you know he's following you? I pressed. Crane hesitated. Because he wants me to know. Wolfe nodded slowly. Intimidation, psychological pressure, a familiar tactic. Crane leaned forward. You have to help me. I don't care about Hemsley's sister or the police. I just want to live. Wolfe regarded him coolly. Fear does not entitle one to priority. Crane's voice cracked. I'll tell you everything. Wolfe paused, then nodded once. Begin. Crane talked for nearly an hour. I took notes until my hand cramped. Names of shell companies, dates, ports, patterns, nothing explicit enough to hang a charge on, but enough to suggest a carefully constructed financial machine moving money quietly through international shipping lanes. And threaded through it all were 3 names: Leonard Hemsley, Harold Crane, and a man Crane referred to only as Mr. North, a name later used by Crane's internal security replacement. North, Wolfe said. An alias. Yes, Crane said. We never met in person, only intermediaries, instructions. Then how do you know this Mr. North exists? Wolfe asked. Crane looked uncomfortable, because someone gave orders. Wolfe nodded. Anonymity is power. Crane finished by repeating his fear, Christmas morning, the notes, the certainty. Wolfe stood, which startled Crane more than any raised voice could have. You will remain alive, Wolfe said, provided you do exactly as I instruct. Crane swallowed. Anything. You will not contact anyone from your previous arrangements, Wolfe said. You will not leave the city. You will inform me of every note, every call, every shadow. Crane nodded vigorously. And, Wolfe added, you will accept police protection. Crane recoiled. I can't. You can, Wolfe said firmly, and you will. Your reluctance is irrelevant. Your survival is not. Crane sagged back. If that's the price. It is, Wolfe said. After Crane left, I closed the door and leaned against it. Well, I said, Christmas is shaping up nicely. Wolfe returned to his chair. This is no longer a single case. It is a structure. A structure with sharp edges, I said. Yes, Wolfe said, and with a designer. You think Mr. North killed Hemsley? I asked. I think, Wolfe said, that Leonard Hemsley's death was a demonstration. For Crane, I said. For all of them, Wolfe said, Fear is contagious. I frowned, and the sister. She is afraid of something else, Wolfe said, which suggests overlapping fears. I scratched my head. 2 clients, 1 corpse, and Christmas looming. Wolfe picked up his book but did not open it. The murderer believes themselves unseen. That is their error. Outside, the city bustled with holiday cheer, carols drifting faintly through the cold air. Inside, a man waited for death before Christmas, and another lay already buried. And somewhere in the city, someone believed they were clever enough to control it all. Nero Wolfe had never forgiven such arrogance. Chapter 3. A gift wrapped in threats. Archie examined the notes, typed, precise, no fingerprints, no flair. Each warned Crane to settle accounts before the bells ring. Saul reported 2 men tailing Crane the night before. Professionals, not amateurs. Christmas music drifted up from the street, clashing with the menace. Wolfe concluded the threats were deadlines, not bluffs. I had cleared my desk completely, which for me was an act of rare discipline bordering on hysteria. 3 sheets of paper lay arranged in a straight line, squared to the edge as though they had been measured with a ruler. If paper could look smug, these did. They radiated the confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and expected obedience in return. I put on gloves before touching them again, not because I expected to find anything. There was nothing to find, but because handling them bare-handed felt like shaking hands with a snake. Typed, I said, more to myself than to Wolfe. Standard typeface, no quirks, no broken letters, either a well-maintained machine or a rental. Wolfe sat back in his chair, his bulk immobile, eyes half closed as if he were resting. He wasn't. Wolfe never wasted stillness. Read them aloud, he said. I picked up the first sheet. Settle accounts before the bells ring. That's it. No punctuation flourish, no exclamation point, just a period, very confident period. The second, Wolfe said. Same sentence, I replied, lifting it. Same spacing, same margins, same everything. And the third, Wolfe prompted. I lifted the last. Identical. Which is significant, Wolfe said. Because, I asked. Because repetition indicates policy, Wolfe said, not emotion. I took the gloves off and leaned back. So whoever wrote these didn't care about frightening Crane creatively, just efficiently. Yes, Wolfe said. Fear was not the objective. Compliance was. I frowned. Crane doesn't strike me as the compliant type. He strikes me as the frightened type, Wolfe corrected. Fear often masquerades as defiance until it collapses. I glanced at the clock, noon. Christmas decorations hung in the hallway outside. Garlands Fritz had installed with military precision. The scent of pine mixed uneasily with the ink and paper on my desk. These envelopes were hand-delivered, I said. No postmark, slid under his apartment door, which eliminates postal variables, Wolfe said, and suggests surveillance. That tracks, I said. Crane says, the calls come when he's home, the notes arrive when he's out. Wolfe nodded. His habits are known. That didn't make me feel festive. The doorbell rang, and moments later Saul Panzer entered, brushing snow from his shoulders. He removed his hat, set it down carefully, and looked at the papers on my desk. Those the notes? He asked. Yes, I said. Try not to admire them. Saul didn't smile. I won't. He took the chair opposite Wolfe, posture alert, but controlled. Saul always looked like a man prepared to leave quickly without appearing rude. Crane was followed last night, Saul said. Wolfe's eyes opened fully. By whom? 2 men, Saul said. They knew what they were doing. Define that, I said. They didn't crowd him, Saul replied. Didn't make eye contact. Didn't try to rush him. They rotated positions, one crossing the street while the other lingered back. Like dancers, I said. Like soldiers, Saul corrected. Wolfe nodded. Professionals. Yes, Saul said. And deliberate. Deliberate how? Wolfe asked. They wanted him to see them, Saul said. Not clearly, but enough to feel it. I tapped the notes. That fits. Indeed, Wolfe said. Intimidation reinforced by presence. Saul glanced at the window. Outside, a pair of carolers stood on the corner, scarves wrapped tight, singing enthusiastically to passers-by who hurried past with parcels and red cheeks. Christmas, Saul muttered, always brings out the worst timing. Christmas brings deadlines, Wolfe said. Financial, emotional, symbolic. I looked at him. Symbolic, yes, Wolfe said. The bells referenced in the notes are not arbitrary. They represent finality, closure. Or judgment, I said. Wolfe's mouth twitched. Possibly. Saul leaned forward. You think the threats are real? They are not threats, Wolfe said calmly. They are schedules, I grimaced. That's worse, yes, Wolfe said. I shuffled the notes again, trying to see something I had missed. No return address. No watermark. No clue at all. That, Wolfe said, is the clue. I looked up. You're going to have to unpack that. These notes are too clean, Wolfe said. Too careful. Criminals who wish to frighten indulge themselves. They add menace, flourish. These do not. Because, Saul asked. Because the writer is not interested in Crane's reaction, Wolfe said, only in the outcome. Which is, I asked, though I already knew. Settlement, Wolfe said. One way or another. Saul's jaw tightened. And if Crane can't settle, then, Wolfe said, he will be removed. The word sat heavily in the room. I rubbed my face. Police protection should complicate that. Only slightly, Wolfe said. Protection deters impulse. It does not deter planning. Saul nodded grimly. These men weren't impulsive. No, Wolfe said. They were confirming. I frowned. Confirming what? That Crane understands, Wolfe said. And does he? I asked. Saul shrugged. He understands he's scared. That is insufficient, Wolfe said. Understanding requires comprehension of options. I glanced at the calendar again. Christmas Eve was 3 days away. So what's the play? I asked. Wolfe steepled his fingers. We identify the authority issuing these instructions. Mr. North, Saul said. An alias, Wolfe replied, but authority nonetheless. I sighed. A ghost with a calendar. A manager, Wolfe corrected. Managers set deadlines. Saul leaned back and enforced them. Crane thinks money will fix this. It will not, Wolfe said. Money already failed. Saul raised an eyebrow. How so? If money were sufficient, Wolfe said, Hemsley would be alive. That shut us up for a moment. Outside, the bells rang again, bright and cheerful, a Salvation Army volunteer shaking a tin with enthusiasm. The sound filtered up through the glass, mocking in its cheer. I stopped pacing. So these notes aren't bluffs? No, Wolfe said. Bluffs invite response. These invite compliance. Saul stood. I'll stay on Crane. Yes, Wolfe said. Observe, do not interfere. And me, I asked. You, Wolfe said. Will continue to speak with Miss Hemsley. I frowned. You think she knows more? I know she does, Wolfe said. Her fear is different. Different how? I pressed. She fears exposure, Wolfe said, not death. That gave me pause. Saul retrieved his hat. I still don't like this. Nor should you, Wolfe said. Comfort is the enemy of perception. After Saul left, I sat back down and stared at the notes again. Deadlines before Christmas, I muttered. Some people give fruitcake. Wolfe allowed himself the faintest smile. Fruitcake is also a warning. I looked at him. You're enjoying this? No, Wolfe said. But I am engaged. There was a difference, and I knew it. When Wolfe was engaged, someone else was usually in trouble. The notes lay silent, patient. Somewhere in the city, someone believed time was on their side. Christmas music floated up from the street again, cheerful and oblivious. I had the uneasy feeling that the bells, when they rang, would not be celebrating peace on earth. Chapter 4 business like Blood Crane's shipping firm had lost 2 partners in the past year. Both ruled accidents. Wolfe reviewed the files and found money moving after each death. Saul confirmed one partner died just days before last Christmas. Patterns don't wear disguises forever. Someone was cleaning house on a holiday schedule. By the time the files arrived, the brownstone had settled into its winter hush, the particular almost reverent quiet that descends when snow dampens the city and Nero Wolfe is at work. Fritz had declared the house closed to all interruptions short of fire or famine, and I had been relegated to the role of courier and spectator, which Wolfe considers my natural position during periods of analysis. The folders lay stacked on Wolfe's desk, thick and heavy, bearing the dull dignity of corporate paperwork. Crane Maritime, Incorporated. The name alone was bland enough to lull suspicion, which was probably the point. Companies that intend mischief rarely announce it with flair. They hide behind neutral words and impressive letterhead. Wolfe adjusted his chair slightly, drew the first file toward him, and began. He read slowly, methodically, as if each page were a course in a long and complicated meal. His fingers turned pages with care, never hurried, never uncertain. When Wolfe reads like that, he is not consuming information, he is dissecting it. I stood near the window, arms crossed, watching snow drift past the glass. After 15 minutes, the silence became unbearable. "Well," I said. Wolfe did not look up. "If you insist on interrupting Archie, at least do so with patience." "I'm full of it," I said. "I'm just short on results." "You will receive them," Wolfe said. "In due course." Another 10 minutes passed. I paced. I stopped. I paced again. Finally, Wolfe spoke. "Observe this," he said, sliding a document toward me without lifting his eyes. I stepped closer and read. "Insurance settlement," I said. "Michael Rourke, partner. Cause of death?" Wolfe asked. "Boating accident," I replied. "Drowned, body recovered 2 days later." Wolfe nodded once. "Now compare." He passed me another sheet. "Thomas Bell," I read. "Another partner. Fell down an elevator shaft." "Date," Wolfe said again. "December 20th, I said slowly. 4 days before Christmas, Wolfe said. I looked up. "That's not coincidence." "No," Wolfe agreed. "It is selection." I flipped through more pages, following his finger, as he indicated line after line of figures. "Transfers," I said. "Outgoing funds, 2 weeks after each death." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Accounts consolidated, authority redistributed." "To Crane?" I asked. "To a holding entity," Wolfe corrected. "One that answers to no single partner." I frowned. "So every time someone dies, control tightens?" "Precisely," Wolfe said. "Death simplifies management." "That's a hell of a business model," I muttered. "Many businesses rely on attrition," Wolfe said. "This one merely accelerates it." His face told me he had news, and it wasn't the cheerful kind. "You find something," Saul said. Wolfe inclined his head. "Confirmations are always welcome." Saul removed his hat and sat. "Thomas Bell didn't fall by accident." "Of course not," Wolfe said calmly. Saul went on. "Bell argued with Crane the week before his death, loudly about money movement and exposure. Bell wished to withdraw," Wolfe said. "Yes," Saul said, "and he wasn't subtle about it." Wolfe nodded. Leonard Hemsley followed the same path. "And Rourke?" I asked. Saul grimaced. "Different motive. Same result. He wanted more money, said the risk justified it. Greed and conscience," Wolfe said, "both destabilizing." Saul leaned forward. "There's another death you should know about." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Proceed." 3 years ago," Saul said. "Junior executive, not a partner, knew too much, hit by a car." "And the date?" Wolfe asked. Saul didn't need to look at his notebook. "December 23rd. I exhaled slowly. "Christmas again." "Yes," Saul said. Wolfe closed the file gently, as if tucking in something dangerous. 3 December deaths. 1 August. A pattern refined by necessity. "Rourke pushed early," I said. "So he died early." "Exactly," Wolfe said. Christmas is symbolic. August was practical. Saul shook his head. Somebody's been pruning this company like a hedge. Yes, Wolfe said, removing anything that grows unpredictably. I paced again, the implications stacking up unpleasantly. So Crane knows the pattern. He suspects it, Wolfe said, which is why he came to us. And Hemsley? I asked. Hemsley panicked, Wolfe said. Panic disrupts schedules. Saul frowned. So killing Hemsley early was corrective action. Saul glanced at the window. That's a lot of fear hanging over one holiday. Fear is most effective when people expect comfort, Wolfe said. I rubbed my arms. What about Clara Hemsley? Wolfe's gaze hardened slightly. She was leverage. Against her brother, Saul said. Yes, Wolfe said. Family is efficient leverage. And now? I asked. Now she is a liability, Wolfe said. That didn't sit well with me. So what's next? Saul asked. Wolfe folded his hands. We disrupt the pattern. How? Saul asked. By accelerating it, Wolfe said. I stared. You want to speed up a murder schedule? Saul let out a breath. That's risky. Risk is already embedded, Wolfe said. We are merely reallocating it. He looked at me. Archie, you will arrange a meeting. With Crane, I said. And the police, Wolfe added. I blinked. All together, yes, Wolfe said. We will compress time. Saul stood. Summonin won't like that. Wolfe allowed himself a thin smile. Summon never does. Outside, the afternoon light faded early, the city draping itself in colored bulbs and artificial cheer. Inside the brownstone, the numbers told their story plainly now. Money moved. Men died. December returned each year like a ledger closing. This was not chaos, it was bookkeeping. And someone, somewhere, believed themselves the accountant. They were about to be audited. Chapter 5. The first body on Christmas Eve, one of Crane's former accountants, was found dead in his apartment. No sign of forced entry, no struggle, just a neat ending. Saul confirmed the man had met Crane earlier that day. The killer was accelerating the timetable. Wolfe disliked haste. It made mistakes inevitable. Christmas Eve in New York is an elaborate lie that nearly everyone agrees to tell. The city wraps itself in lights and music and insists on peace, generosity and goodwill, while beneath the decorations pulses a restless urgency that never quite settles. People hurry not because they want to arrive somewhere, but because time itself has become accusatory. Every ticking clock feels personal. Every ringing bell sounds like a warning. It was shortly after noon when the fiction cracked. The telephone rang downstairs with a sharp insistence that cut through the muted holiday, sounds drifting in from the street. Fritz answered it in the hall. I heard only his side of the exchange, but I knew something was wrong from the way he paused before responding, as if choosing words carefully would somehow soften what he was hearing. When he replaced the receiver, he did so with exaggerated care. Wolfe accepted the call without rising. He listened in complete silence, eyes closed, fingers resting together as though he were meditating, rather than receiving news of violence. When he spoke, it was only to ask two questions, both exact, both necessary. He thanked the caller, hung up, and opened his eyes. Well, I said. Gerald Fenton, Wolfe replied. Deceased. The name landed hard. Crane's accountant. Former accountant, Wolfe corrected. Dismissed 18 months ago. Cause? I asked. Manual strangulation, Wolfe said evenly. Performed with competence. That's not a phrase I enjoy, I said. Nor should you, Wolfe replied. There was no struggle. That detail lodged unpleasantly in my mind. No struggle meant familiarity, trust, or resignation. None of them were comforting. The apartment was on West End Avenue, in a building that prided itself on quiet respectability. The lobby smelled faintly of furniture, polish, and boiled cabbage, the sort of place where neighbors nod politely and assume nothing ever happens behind closed doors. It was an ideal setting for a crime that wanted no attention. The police were already there, tired and irritated at having their Christmas Eve interrupted by a corpse that had no regard for schedules. They let me in with minimal ceremony. By now they were used to my face and my questions, even if they pretended otherwise. Fenton lay on his bed, fully clothed. His shoes were aligned neatly beneath a chair. His jacket hung straight in the closet. His wallet lay untouched on the dresser. The room was orderly to the point of sterility. Only the bruising around his throat betrayed the violence. "He didn't fight," I said quietly. "No," the detective agreed. "Either he trusted whoever came in, or he knew better than to resist." "Anyone hear anything?" I asked. "Nothing," the detective said. "Neighbor heard the television earlier, Christmas music." That detail lingered with me longer than it should have. Something about carols playing while a man was being killed felt especially obscene. Back at the brownstone, Saul Panzer was already waiting. His hat was off, his coat draped over a chair, and his posture had that rigid stillness that meant he had already pieced things together and didn't like the picture. "He met Crane this morning," Saul said as soon as I entered. Wolfe nodded once. "Location?" "A diner near Penn Station," Saul replied. "Early coffee and eggs. Nothing fancy." "Purpose?" Wolfe asked. "Crane asked for records," Saul said. "Old transfer logs, backup copies Fenton kept after he was let go." "Insurance," Wolfe murmured. "And panic," I added. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Crane attempted to reclaim leverage, and instead," Saul said, "he tripped a wire." "Precisely," Wolfe replied. "This death was not on the original schedule." I sat down slowly, "So the timetable's been moved up." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Acceleration follows disruption. It is reflexive." "That's bad," Saul said. "It is inevitable," Wolfe replied. "Control, once threatened, becomes rigid." I rubbed my face. "So Christmas morning is no longer the endpoint." "Correct," Wolfe said. "It is now merely symbolic." Saul leaned forward. "Then Crane's next." "He has always been next," Wolfe said. "The difference is immediacy." I studied Wolfe. "You said haste makes mistakes." "It does," Wolfe said, "and this was one." "Fenton wasn't important enough?" I asked. "He was important," Wolfe said, "but killing him gains little strategically and reveals much tactically." "Such as?" Saul asked. "Proximity," Wolfe said. "The killer was close enough to act personally." "And confident enough to do so," Saul added. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Delegation would have taken time." That detail sat heavily in the room. The controller, the unseen hand we had been circling, was no longer content to remain distant. Distance had given way to urgency, and urgency breeds exposure. He stood and paced, the implications stacking up unpleasantly. "So what do we do?" "You," Wolfe said, turning to me. "We'll speak with Crane again." "And tell him what?" I asked. "That he is safe," Wolfe said. I stared. "That's a lie." "Yes," Wolfe said calmly, "but a useful one." Saul frowned. "Why calm him?" "Because fear accelerates," Wolfe replied. "Calm delays. We require delay." "And Fenton?" I asked quietly. "Fenton was a mistake," Wolfe said. "And mistakes compound." The clock ticked steadily on the wall, indifferent to murder and mistletoe alike. Outside, the city hummed with artificial peace. Somewhere a choir was singing about silent nights. Somewhere else, Gerald Fenton's death was being catalogued, his life reduced to measurements and photographs. And somewhere, closer now, less patient, a man who believed himself untouchable had broken pattern. Nero Wolfe disliked haste, because haste always revealed the mind behind the crime. And for the first time since this began, that mind was no longer willing to wait. Chapter 6. Saul's warning proven right. Saul intercepted a call meant for Crane, arranging a midnight meeting near the docks. Saul didn't like docks at night, especially in winter. Wolfe ordered Archie to accompany Saul, despite protest. Snow muffled the city, making every sound a secret. The trap was already set. If Saul Panzer says he doesn't like something, you pay attention. Saul is not a man given to theatrics or unnecessary commentary. He does not dislike things lightly. He dislikes them when experience, instinct, and a finely tuned sense of survival all reach the same unpleasant conclusion. So when Saul stood in Wolfe's office that evening, coat still on, hat in hand, and said, "I don't like this," the room adjusted accordingly. Wolfe did not look up from his chair at first. He was listening. Not to Saul's words, but to their weight. I was already alert. Saul's earlier unease had proven well-founded, and the city had supplied a body to confirm it. "Explain," Wolfe said finally. Saul did, calmly, precisely. "I was sitting in Crane's apartment," Saul said. "Listening to his phone line. He's jumpy. Calls come in, he flinches. Most of them are nothing. One wasn't." "Describe it," Wolfe said. "Man's voice," Saul replied. "Low, controlled. No accent worth naming." He asked for Crane by name. "And," Wolfe prompted. "I didn't give him Crane," Saul said. "I said he wasn't available." "What did the caller do?" Wolfe asked. "He didn't argue," Saul said. "Didn't threaten. He said he'd call back." "That is significant," Wolfe said. "Yes," Saul agreed. "He did, 15 minutes later." "And?" I asked. "He said Crane needed to meet him," Saul replied. "Tonight, midnight." Wolfe's eyes opened fully. "Location, the docks," Saul said. "Near the old Pier 47. I made a face. "That's festive." Saul didn't smile. "The caller said Crane had something that didn't belong to him, said it was time to return it." "Which implies possession," Wolfe said. "Yes," Saul replied, "and urgency." I leaned back. "Crane hasn't said anything about taking something." "No," Saul said, "but he's been poking around, asking for records, asking questions." "Which may have been interpreted as theft," Wolfe said, "or preparation for it." Saul nodded. "Either way, they want him isolated." "And dead," I said. "Yes," Saul said. The room was quiet for a moment. Outside, the snow had begun again, thick and steady, muting the city into something deceptively peaceful. Wolfe folded his hands. "Archie will accompany you." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Wolfe said. I protested. "I am not doc material. I slip, I bruise, I complain." "You observe," Wolfe said. "You report. You survive." Saul frowned. "I don't like taking Archie into this." "That is precisely why he will go," Wolfe replied. "The killer expects professionals. Archie is unexpected." "Thanks," I said. "I think." "You will not interfere," Wolfe added. "You will not be heroic. You will do exactly as Saul instructs." "Heroism is overrated," I said, "but I reserve the right to duck." "You will reserve the right to remain alive," Wolfe said. "That is sufficient." We left the brownstone just before 11. The snow had thickened, falling in slow, heavy flakes that softened the streetlights and swallowed sound. The city felt hushed, conspiratorial, as though it were holding its breath. Saul drove. He always did when things mattered. He handled the car the way he handled everything else. Smoothly, without wasted motion. "You armed?" he asked me. I tapped my coat. "As much as I ever am." He nodded. "Stick close. Don't speak unless I tell you." "Understood," I said. "I can be invisible when motivated." "That'll help," Saul said. "Tonight isn't about us." The docks were worse than I remembered. Industrial, desolate, the kind of place where the city sheds its skin and leaves nothing human behind. Warehouses loomed like silent witnesses. The river lay black and slow, its surface barely rippling beneath the falling snow. Pier 47 was half abandoned. A few lights burned dimly, casting long, distorted shadows across the wet pavement. Saul parked well back. We walked the rest of the way, footsteps muffled by snow, breath fogging the air. "No sign of Crane yet," I whispered. "He's late," Saul said. "That's good. We took cover behind a stack of crates near the edge of the pier. The cold crept through my coat, settling into my bones. Every sound felt amplified and distorted. Water lapping, a distant horn, the faint creak of metal. Minutes passed. Then headlights appeared, cutting through the snow. "Crane," Saul said quietly. The car pulled up near the end of the pier. Crane got out, hunched against the cold, shoulders tight with tension. He looked smaller, out here, stripped of offices and security and illusions. He waited. I watched him pace, rub his hands together, glance nervously into the shadows. "He's scared," I murmured. "Yes," Saul said, "and they know it." Footsteps sounded from the far side of the pier, slow, unhurried. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, coat dark, hat pulled low. He walked toward Crane without hesitation. "This is it," Saul said softly. The man stopped a few feet from Crane. They spoke, but the wind and distance stole their words. Crane gestured sharply, his movements frantic. Then the second man appeared. "Damn," I breathed. He came from behind, silent, efficient. Saul moved instantly. "Stay here." He stepped out, weapon drawn, voice cutting through the night. "That's far enough." Everything froze. The man facing Crane turned slowly, eyes assessing, calculating. The second man hesitated, then shifted his weight. "Drop it," Saul said. "Both of you." For a heartbeat, I thought they might comply. Then the second man ran. The night exploded into motion. Saul fired once, a sharp crack that echoed off the warehouses. The runner stumbled, fell hard, skidding across the wet concrete. The first man lunged for Crane. I didn't think. I moved. I collided with the man just as he reached Crane, the impact knocking us both sideways. We went down hard, the cold biting through my coat as we hit the ground. He was strong, trained. He recovered fast. So did I, slower but motivated. He swung. I ducked. He cursed. I grabbed his coat, felt something hard beneath it. Saul fired again. The man stumbled, dropped from sight, and did not rise again. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing and the river. Then Saul was there, hauling me up. "You all right?" "I think so," I said. "I may have lost a year or two of my life." Crane stood shaking, eyes wide, staring at the body on the pier. "They were going to kill me," and silence hail. "Yes," Saul said. "You were late." Crane swallowed hard. "They said I took something." Saul looked at him sharply. "Did you?" Crane hesitated. "Too long." "Yes," he whispered. "Copies, records, everything." Saul exhaled. "You idiot." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. We didn't wait back at the brownstone. Wolfe listened to the report without interruption. When we finished, he nodded once. "Saul's warning," Wolfe said, "was correct." "Understatement," I said. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. "The killer has now made two errors, acceleration and exposure." "And now?" Saul asked. "Now," Wolfe said, "we control the schedule." Outside, the snow kept falling, erasing footprints, smoothing evidence, pretending nothing had happened. But the trap had been sprung, and the one who set it was no longer invisible. Chapter 7. Violence in the cold at the docks. Gunfire shattered the silence before words were exchanged. Saul dragged Archie behind a crate as a body hit the frozen ground. The shooter fled, leaving Victor Hale dead on the frozen concrete, but not before Saul recognized the way he moved. A former security chief from Crane's company. The case had teeth now, and they were sharp. The first shot did not sound like gunfire. That was my initial, useless thought as the night tore itself open. It sounded more like a plank snapping under strain, a sharp, flat crack swallowed, almost immediately by the snow. Heavy air. The docks had a way of absorbing noise, muffling it, twisting it into something unfamiliar. Sound traveled oddly there, skimming over black water and disappearing into the empty bulk of warehouses. The second shot was unmistakable. Saul reacted before my mind finished catching up. One moment I was standing half, exposed near the edge of the pier. my breath fogging the air as I tried to focus on shapes in the darkness, and the next I was airborne, yanked sideways with a strength that suggested Saul had no intention of negotiating with physics. We hit the ground hard behind a stack of wooden crates, the impact driving the air out of my lungs in a sharp, humiliating wheeze. "Down," Saul hissed, his voice low and flat. "Stay down." I didn't argue. Argument seemed like a luxury. Another shot cracked the night, louder now, closer. Something thudded against metal nearby, ricochet whining like an angry insect before vanishing into the dark. The snow continued to fall, absurdly calm, settling on my coat collar and the rough wood inches from my face. "What?" I began. Saul's hand pressed my shoulder, firm, quiet. I obeyed. It was not bravery, it was survival. I lifted my head just enough to see past the crate. The pier stretched out in broken lines of shadow and weak light. Near the end, a shape lay crumpled on the frozen concrete. A man, he wasn't moving. Another figure was already running. The runner moved with purpose, not panic. His stride was long and controlled, feet finding traction where there shouldn't have been any. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Whoever he was, he had come prepared to leave alone. Saul raised his weapon, tracked the fleeing shape for a heartbeat, then lowered it. "Gone," he muttered. I swallowed, my mouth dry. The man on the ground hit, Saul said, hard. We waited. Seconds stretched into something elastic and unpleasant. The docks held their breath. Somewhere out on the river, a horn sounded long and mournful, as if marking time for something that had just ended. Saul moved first. He rose into a crouch, scanning the shadows, weapon steady. When he gestured for me to follow, I did, my legs feeling vaguely disconnected from the rest of me. We approached the body cautiously. The man lay on his side, one arm twisted beneath him, the other flung out awkwardly. Blood spread darkly against the pale concrete, shockingly vivid against the snow. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. "He's dead," I said unnecessarily. "Yes," Saul replied. Up close. The violence was more intimate, more obscene. The shot had taken him in the chest, clean, efficient, not random. "Who is he?" I asked. Saul knelt, gloved fingers, checking the man's coat quickly. He found a wallet, opened it, then closed it again with a quiet finality. "I know him," Saul said. I looked up sharply. "From where?" Saul's jaw tightened. "From Crane Maritime." That chilled me more than the wind. "Security," Saul continued. "Head of it once. Name's Victor Hale." I frowned. "Was fired 2 years ago," Saul said. "Officially downsizing unofficially?" He asked too many questions. In death he looked older, the lines deeper, the confidence stripped away. "So he was the shooter?" "No," Saul said. I blinked. "Then he was the decoy," Saul said, "or the courier." I felt the implications click into place, ugly and sharp. "The runner." "Yes," Saul said. "That was the real muscle." "And Hale," I said. "Hale was expendable," Saul replied. "Like the others." Sirens wailed in the distance now, faint but approaching. Someone had heard the shots, or someone had finally decided not to ignore them. "We need to move," Saul said. "Wait," I said, pointing. "There, by the crates." Saul followed my gaze. Something lay half, hidden in the snow, dark against white. He crouched, retrieved it, and examined it under the weak pier light. A glove, heavy black, the kind favored by men who expect to use their hands for unpleasant things. Saul slipped it into a pocket. "Good, good," I echoed. "Yes," Saul said. "People make mistakes when they hurry." We retreated the way we had come, keeping to shadows, letting the growing noise draw attention elsewhere. By the time uniformed officers flooded the pier, we were already a block away, the docks swallowing us back into anonymity. The ride back to the brownstone was quiet. Saul drove, eyes fixed on the road, hands steady on the wheel. Snow swept across the windshield in steady arcs, the wipers ticking like a metronome, marking the aftermath. "You recognized the runner," I said finally. Saul didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was careful. "I recognized how he moved." "That's not an answer," I said. "It's the only one I have," Saul replied. For now, we reached West 35th Street. Just after 1, the brownstone loomed warm and solid, a defiant island of light in the frozen city. Inside, Fritz had left a lamp on, the glow spilling into the hall like a promise. Wolfe was awake. Of course he was. He sat in his chair, robe wrapped around him, eyes alert. He took in our faces, our posture, the faint smell of cold and gunpowder we carried with us. "We're port," he said. Saul did precisely. No embellishment, no speculation beyond what he could support. Wolfe listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When Saul finished, Wolfe was silent for a long moment. "Victor Hale," Wolfe said at last. "Former head of security." "Yes," Saul replied. "And the shooter?" Wolfe asked. "Escaped," Saul said, "but not unknown." Wolfe's eyes flicked to him. "Explain." "He moved like trained security," Saul said. "Company, trained, not freelance." Wolfe nodded slowly. "Which narrows the field." "He shot Hale without hesitation," Saul continued. "That tells me Hale was never meant to leave that pier." "A disposable intermediary," Wolfe said, consistent with our pattern. I dropped into my chair, my muscles finally registering the night's events. So now we have gunfire, a corpse at the docks, and a former employee pulling triggers. "Yes," Wolfe said. "The case has progressed from abstraction to violence." "Progressed," I said. "That's one way to put it." "The escalation is instructive," Wolfe said calmly. "It confirms desperation," Saul frowned. "It also confirms organization." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "But organization frays under pressure." I rubbed my hands together, trying to bring feeling back into them. "Crane knew Hale?" "Yes," Saul said. "Worked with him for years." "Which means," Wolfe said, "that Crane's internal structure has been weaponized against him." "And against everyone else who knew too much," I added. Wolfe inclined his head. "Precisely." Silence settled over the room again, heavy but purposeful. "The shooter fled," Wolfe said, "which suggests his task was limited." "To silence Hale," Saul said. "Yes," Wolfe said. "And to send a message." "To whom?" I asked. "To us," Wolfe replied. "And to Crane." I felt a flicker of anger, then message received. Wolfe's eyes gleamed faintly. "Excellent." Saul shifted. "This isn't theoretical anymore." "No," Wolfe agreed. "It now involves men who believe they can kill with impunity." "And," I prompted. "And men who believe that," Wolfe said, "eventually make mistakes." Outside, the snow continued to fall, smoothing over violence, pretending the docks had not echoed with gunfire hours earlier. The city would wake to Christmas morning soon, oblivious. But the case had teeth now, and it had drawn blood. Chapter 8. Wolfe connects the chain back at the brownstone. Wolfe assembled the facts like a grim ornament. Crane had staged false accidents to seize full control of the company. Victor Hale handled the dirty work until fear replaced loyalty. Now the replacement security chief wanted payment or revenge. Christmas was merely the deadline. The brownstone has a way of absorbing violence once you bring it home. The thick walls, the heavy furniture, the familiar smells of coffee and polished wood. All of it conspires to make the outside world feel distant, even unreal. But that night, the docks came with us. They clung to our coats, to our silence, to the way Saul stood too straight, and the way my hands refused to stop trembling. Wolfe waited until Fritz had brought coffee and quietly withdrawn before he spoke. He did not ask for a dramatic retelling. He did not ask how close the bullets had come. He had already discounted such irrelevancies. "Began at the beginning," Wolfe said. Saul did. He laid out the events at the docks with his usual precision. The call, the meeting, the gunfire, the dead man, the escape. He did not speculate. He did not editorialize. When Saul Panzer reports facts, He does so with the confidence of a man who has already tested them against reality. When he finished, Wolfe sat motionless, eyes closed, fingertips pressed together. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside and the distant ticking of the clock. "Victor Hale," Wolfe said at last. "Former head of security at Crane Maritime." "Yes," Saul replied. "A man skilled in discretion," Wolfe continued. "And violence." "Yes," Saul said again. "And now dead," Wolfe concluded. "Executed by a colleague." Saul nodded. He wasn't surprised. He knew what was coming. "That is often the case with traitors," Wolfe said mildly. I bristled. "You're calling Hale a traitor." "I am calling him a transitional instrument," Wolfe replied. "Loyalty is irrelevant. Utility is what matters." I sank into my chair. "That's cold." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and accurate." He opened his eyes and looked at me. "Archie, recount the accountant's death." I did. I described Fenton's apartment, the lack of struggle, the timing, the meeting with Crane earlier that day. Wolfe listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally raising a finger to halt me while he considered a point. When I finished, he turned to Saul. "And the earlier deaths?" "Bell," Saul said. "Rourke, the junior executive 3 years ago." Lines connected them, intersected them, formed a crude but unmistakable diagram. "This," Wolfe said, tapping the paper, "is not a criminal enterprise hijacking a legitimate company." I leaned forward. "No, it is a legitimate company weaponized by one of its own," Wolfe said. Saul's eyes narrowed. "Crane." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Harold Crane." I exhaled slowly. "So Crane isn't just the next victim." "No," Wolfe said. "He is the architect." The room went still. "Wait," I said. "Crane's been terrified. The notes, the calls, all genuine," Wolfe said. "Fear does not preclude guilt. Indeed, it often accompanies it." Saul frowned. "You're saying Crane set this whole thing up?" "I am saying," Wolfe replied, "that Crane designed a system in which partners could be removed under the guise of misfortune, allowing him to consolidate control." I shook my head. "Then why kill Hemsley? Why kill Fenton?" "Because the system evolved," Wolfe said. "Crane's ambition exceeded his patience." He pointed to the diagram. "Initially, deaths were staged as accidents. Rourke, Bell, plausible, clean. But as time passed, fear replaced loyalty." Saul nodded slowly. "Hale." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Victor Hale was Crane's instrument, security chief, enforcer cleaner. And eventually," I said, "he wanted more." "Or wanted out," Wolfe said. "The two are often indistinguishable." Saul's mouth tightened. So Hale turned. "Not immediately," Wolfe said. "At first, Hale enjoyed power, then he saw inevitability." "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning that when the structure was complete," Wolfe said, "there would be no further need for him." I felt a chill. "So Hale started pressuring Crane." "Yes," Wolfe said. "The notes, the calls, the deadlines. Christmas," Saul said. "Symbolic and practical," Wolfe replied. "A final accounting." I leaned back, letting it sink in. "So Crane's fear wasn't fear of being killed?" "No," Wolfe said. "It was fear of exposure." "And Hale?" Saul asked. "Hale wanted payment," Wolfe said. "Or immunity, possibly both." "And when Crane started scrambling, asking for records, meeting with Fenton, he signaled weakness," Wolfe said, "and desperation." I nodded slowly. "So Hale arranged the dock meeting to eliminate Crane?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "But Hale underestimated his own vulnerability." "Because the real killer," Saul said, "was someone else." Wolfe nodded. "Hale was not the ultimate authority. He was merely a senior employee." I frowned. "Then who shot him?" Wolfe's eyes gleamed faintly. Samani Crane had already prepared to replace him. Saul stiffened. "Another security man." "Yes," Wolfe said. "One loyal enough to kill his predecessor without hesitation." "And then disappear," I said. "Precisely," Wolfe said. "The system cannibalizes itself." The clock ticked loudly now, each second a reminder that Christmas morning was approaching. "So where does that leave us?" I asked. Wolfe leaned back, satisfied. "With motive, means, and pattern." "And proof?" Saul asked. Wolfe smiled thinly. "Imminent." I frowned. Crane staged his own terror. "Yes," Wolfe said. By allowing Hale to frighten him, Crane could plausibly present himself as a victim. "And bring us in," I said. "Yes," Wolfe said. "An error born of arrogance." Saul nodded. "He thought you'd protect him." "Or eliminate his problem," Wolfe said, "by identifying Hale. And instead," I said, "we identified him." Wolfe inclined his head. "Correct." Silence fell again, heavier now, but charged with purpose. "What about Clara Hemsley?" I asked. Wolfe's expression softened slightly. "Collateral. Leonard's death was premature. Crane panicked when Leonard threatened confession. And Fenton?" Saul asked. "Another premature action," Wolfe said. "Each act of haste eroded Crane's control." I stood and paced, adrenaline finally giving way to anger. "So how do we end this?" Wolfe folded his hands. "We force the final accounting." Saul raised an eyebrow. "How?" "By arranging a meeting," Wolfe said calmly. "In my office." Stopped pacing. "Christmas gathering." "Yes," Wolfe said, "all principals present." "And the police?" I asked. "Nearby," Wolfe said, "not intrusive." Saul exhaled. "Crane won't like that." "No," Wolfe agreed, "but he will attend." "Why?" I asked. Wolfe smiled. "A rare and dangerous thing, because he believes I can save him." Outside, the city prepared for Christmas Day, unaware that another kind of reckoning was being scheduled. Lights twinkled, bells waited. Inside the brownstone, Nero Wolfe had finished connecting the chain, and once a chain is complete, it can only be pulled or broken. Chapter 9. Turning the trap, Wolfe instructed Crane to follow the final demand and meet at his own warehouse. Police were alerted quietly, positioned invisibly. Saul watched the exits, cold-eyed and steady. Wolfe believed criminals reveal themselves when they think they've won. Pride is louder than gunfire. If Nero Wolfe has a favorite moment in any investigation, it is not the unmasking itself, nor even the confession that follows. It is the instant just before. The fragile, fleeting moment when the guilty believe the danger has passed, the balance restored, the outcome secured. In that instant, vigilance relaxes, pride exhales, and truth, like steam from an opened valve, escapes. Wolfe understands this not as philosophy, but as engineering. Criminals, like machines, fail under predictable stress. The decision to turn the trap was made without ceremony. "Mr. Crane will comply," Wolfe said, his voice level, almost bored. "He will do precisely what he has been instructed to do." I stared at him across the desk. "You're sending him to the place where all this started." "No," Wolfe corrected. "I am sending him to the place where it ends." Saul stood near the window, hands buried in his coat pockets, watching the slow drift of snow along 35th Street. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. Saul relaxed, only when danger had already been measured and categorized. "Crane won't like it," Saul said. "Crane's preferences are no longer relevant," Wolfe replied. "They ceased to matter when he began arranging deaths like quarterly reports." I shifted in my chair. "And the police? They will be present," Wolfe said, "but not prominent." He disliked uniformed clutter almost as much as he disliked incompetence. Police, when used correctly, were tools, not partners. The call to Crane was placed from the brownstone late in the afternoon. After Wolfe had reviewed his notes one final time, Saul listened on the extension, his face impassive. I took notes out of habit, though Wolfe had already memorized the conversation before it occurred. "Mr. Crane," Wolfe said into the receiver, his tone calm, authoritative, and entirely unsympathetic, "you will follow the instructions you have received." Crane's voice came back thin and strained. "You said I'd be safe." "I said," Wolfe replied, evenly, "that listening to me improved your odds." A pause, breathing fear. He wants me at the warehouse, Crane said. Tonight, midnight. Yes, Wolfe said. You will go. Alone, Crane whispered. Yes, Wolfe said again. And you? Crane asked. I will not be there, Wolfe said. I dislike warehouses. That part, at least, was true. Crane swallowed audibly. What if he kills me? Then you will die, Wolfe said calmly. If you do not go, you will also die. The difference is that one option may yet inconvenience your enemies. Silence stretched across the line. What do I bring? Crane asked finally. Everything you took, Wolfe said. Every record, every copy, every scrap you thought would protect you. Another pause. All right, Crane said. Wolfe replaced the receiver gently, as though nothing of consequence had occurred. He'll come, Saul said. Yes, Wolfe agreed, because he believes obedience may still purchase mercy. And because, I added, he wants this finished. Wolfe inclined his head. Precisely. The warehouse sat along the river like a forgotten chapter of the city. Brick and steel, scarred by age and neglect. Once it had been busy with men and machines, schedules and shipments. Now it waited, hollow and patient, a shell ready to echo with whatever noise fate decided to introduce. We arrived separately. Saul went first. Hours ahead, slipping into the structure with practiced ease. He mapped the exits, tested doors, memorized shadows. When Saul Panzer prepared a site, he became part of it. The police arrived next, quietly, unmarked cars rolling in and disappearing into side streets. Men took positions without conversation or ceremony. Wolfe had been very specific. No uniforms, no visible presence, no interference unless absolutely necessary. This was not their stage. Wolfe himself arrived last, to my surprise and irritation. You are not, I began, as he settled into the back seat of the car with a grunt. Built for warehouses. Your concern is touching, Wolfe said, and irrelevant. You said you wouldn't be there. I said I disliked warehouses, Wolfe replied. I did not say I would avoid them when necessary. The cold offended him deeply. He wrapped his coat tightly and scowled at the night as though the temperature were a personal slight. Inside, the warehouse was lit sparingly. A few overhead lamps glowed weakly, casting long, distorted shadows across stacks of crates and abandoned equipment. The air smelled of rust, oil, and river water. Every sound traveled too far, then died abruptly. Saul emerged from the darkness and nodded once. All exits covered, he said. Police, in position, no movement. Waiting is an underappreciated discipline. It requires patience, restraint, and confidence, qualities criminals often lack in the final moments. Midnight crept closer, marked by the faint ticking of my watch and the distant murmur of the river. Headlights finally swept across the loading doors. Crane, Saul said softly. The doors creaked open. Harold Crane stepped inside, clutching a battered briefcase. He looked smaller here, diminished by scale and isolation. The authority he wore in offices and boardrooms had no meaning in this cavernous space. He stopped short when he saw Wolfe. You said you wouldn't be here, Crane snapped. I lied, Wolfe said calmly. Sit down, Crane hesitated, then sat on a crate, his movements stiff and uncertain. Where is he? Crane demanded. You presume you are entitled to answers, Wolfe replied mildly. Crane's hands shook. He said midnight. Yes, Wolfe said. He was imprecise. A voice answered from the shadows. Number I wasn't. The man, known inside Crane Maritime as Mr. North, stepped into the light deliberately, unhurried, as though he had timed his entrance for effect. He was tall, well-dressed, his coat immaculate despite the surroundings. His expression carried an easy confidence, the expression of a man accustomed to solving problems permanently. Saul stiffened. That's him, he murmured. Replacement security, chief internal. The man smiled faintly. You've done well, Harold. Almost. Crane leapt to his feet. You killed Hale. The man shrugged. Victor misunderstood his role. Wolfe spoke then, his voice steady and resonant. "As did you, Mr. Crane." The man turned, surprise flickering briefly across his face. "And you must be Nero Wolfe." "I am," Wolfe said. "And you are the final accountant." The man laughed softly. "Cleaner, actually." "An inelegant euphemism," Wolfe replied. Crane stared between them, horror crystallizing. "You planned this? All of it?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "So did you." The man's smile returned, sharper now. "He's clever, but clever men still die." "Indeed," Wolfe said, "especially when they mistake control for invisibility." The man's hand drifted toward his coat. Sirens wailed suddenly, close and unmistakable. Red and blue lights spilled through the high windows. Saul stepped fully into the open, weapon raised. "Don't!" The man froze. Slowly, carefully, he raised his hands. "Well played," he said quietly. "I allowed myself to enjoy the ending." Wolfe adjusted his coat. "Pride," he said, "is always indulgent." Polis moved into position outside the warehouse, waiting for the final signal. The man was taken without resistance. Crane collapsed onto the crate, shaking, the briefcase slipping from his hands. As the noise settled and order returned, Wolfe turned to me. "You see, Archie," he said, "violence demands witnesses. Pride demands admiration." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and forgiving, as if the city were eager to forget. Inside the warehouse, the trap had closed, not with gunfire, but with certainty. And certainty, Wolfe knew, was always fatal to the guilty. Chapter 10, Christmas Night. Confession: the replacement security chief confronted Crane, weapon shaking from rage and regret. Wolfe stepped forward calmly, naming every crime in order. Crane broke first, confessing to manipulation, greed, and murder. The police moved in as church bells rang faintly. Christmas heard everything. Christmas night has a peculiar stillness to it. The city exhales, briefly relieved of obligation. Gifts have been opened, dinners consumed, arguments postponed until another year. Even New York, that tireless engine of noise and appetite, pauses long enough to let silence breathe. It was into that silence that Nero Wolfe chose to speak. The warehouse had settled into an uneasy calm after the police secured the perimeter. Officers stood at respectful distances, their presence felt rather than seen. Wolfe had insisted on it. Uniforms clutter the mind. He preferred clarity. Crane sat slumped on the crate where we had left him, the battered briefcase at his feet like a discarded organ. His face was gray now, the color of old paper. Across from him stood the man who had believed himself invisible, the replacement security chief. His weapon was still in his hand, though his grip had weakened, the muzzle wavering slightly as adrenaline drained away, and something more corrosive took its place. "Regret. You said I'd be protected." The man said hoarsely, not to Crane, but to the idea of Crane. "You said when it was done, we'd be even." Crane's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Wolfe stepped forward then, his bulk oddly commanding in the bleak industrial space. He did not hurry. He never did. When Wolfe moves, it is because the moment has finally arrived. "Put the weapon down," Wolfe said mildly. "It is no longer relevant." The man's eyes flicked to him. "You don't get to tell me what's relevant." "I assure you," Wolfe replied, "I do." The man laughed, a short, bitter sound. "He promised me immunity, money, a clean exit." "Mr. Crane promises many things," Wolfe said. "Delivery is not among his strengths." Crane flinched. Wolfe turned his attention fully to him. "Harold Crane, you are a man of schedules. You understand order. Therefore, I will proceed in order." I felt it then. The shift, the subtle realignment of the room around Wolfe's voice. Even the police seemed to lean in. Unconsciously, Wolfe did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "First," Wolfe said, "you recognized opportunity. Crane Maritime was stable, profitable, and distributed among partners whose weaknesses you catalogued with care. Greed, caution, conscience, each a vulnerability." Crane shook his head weakly. "That's not." "Second," Wolfe continued, "you enlisted Victor Hale, head of security, a man trained to solve problems quietly. Hale arranged accidents, one drowning, one fall, one vehicular death. Each ruled misfortune, each followed by a convenient redistribution of authority. The man with the gun stiffened. His eyes never left Crane now. "Third," Wolfe said, "you learned that control breeds appetite." Hale demanded assurances, protection, compensation. You gave him neither. Crane's voice cracked. "I couldn't trust him." "Trust," Wolfe said, "was never part of your design." Wolfe took another step forward. "Fourth, Leonard Hemsley threatened confession. Panic ensued. You accelerated. His death was no longer disguised as accident. It was execution." Crane buried his face in his hands. "Fifth," Wolfe went on, "Gerald Fenton, the accountant. Another hasty decision. You sought insurance. Instead, you revealed fear. Fear invited retaliation. The man with the gun swallowed hard. He told me you were going to betray me." "Yes," Wolfe said. And for once Mr. Crane told the truth. Crane looked up sharply. "I was trying to survive." Wolfe regarded him coolly. "You were attempting to escape the consequences of your own ambition." Silence pressed in, heavy and absolute. The man's weapon dipped lower. "You said," he whispered to Crane, "that when it was done, I'd be free." Crane's shoulders sagged. "I needed time." "Time," Wolfe said, "is the one commodity you exhausted." The man laughed again, but this time there was no bitterness, only fatigue. His arm fell to his side, the weapon hanging uselessly in his hand. "I killed for you," he said quietly. "I watched men die because you said it was necessary." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and when necessity ended, you were next. That did it." Crane broke. It wasn't dramatic. There was no collapse, no hysterics. Just a slow, steady unraveling, like a thread finally pulled too far. "I didn't mean to kill anyone," Crane said hoarsely. "At first, I just wanted control, clean control. They were obstacles. That's all, men." Wolfe corrected. Crane nodded numbly. "Men with flaws, with demands, with consciences." "And so," Wolfe said, "you removed them." Crane looked up, eyes glassy. "I planned everything. The audits, the insurance, the timing. Christmas made it neat. People stop looking." "Christmas," Wolfe said softly, "makes people sentimental. You mistook sentiment for blindness." Crane's voice dropped to a whisper. "I thought I was smarter than everyone else." Wolfe inclined his head. "You were mistaken." The man with the gun let it fall. It clattered loudly on the concrete, the sound echoing through the cavernous space like a final punctuation mark. Polis moved in immediately, swift and controlled. Now that the confession was complete, hands were secured, rights were read. Crane did not resist. He barely seemed to notice as they led him away. Faint church bells drifted through the open doors from somewhere upriver, carried by the cold night air. Midnight bells, Christmas bells. They rang softly, insistently, as if bearing witness. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. "Christmas," he said, "has an unfortunate habit of hearing everything." I stood beside him, exhaustion settling into my bones now that the tension had finally drained away. "That was tidy." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Order has been restored." We left the warehouse quietly, slipping back into the city that had already begun to forget. Snow fell lightly, erasing footprints, smoothing over the night's violence with impartial grace. Back at the brownstone, Fritz had left the lights on. The familiar warmth embraced us, the scent of pine and coffee replacing oil and river water. Wolfe removed his coat with visible relief and returned to his chair. He looked, at last, content. "Case closed," he said. I sank into my desk chair and stretched. "Merry Christmas." Wolfe snorted softly. An overrated sentiment. But as the bells rang again in the distance, softer now, I noticed that he did not reach for his book immediately. Even Nero Wolfe, it seemed, listened on Christmas night. Chapter 11, Aftermath in the Snow Crane, and the replacement security chief were taken away under falling snow. Saul lit a cigarette with unsteady fingers. relief finally visible. He said this was why he feared the case, too many ghosts tied to one man. Wolfe returned to his chair, appetite restored. Justice had survived the holiday. Snow has an unearned reputation for purity. It falls softly enough to suggest mercy, quietly enough to imply forgiveness, and steadily enough to persuade the city that whatever lay beneath it has been settled. That night, as Christmas loosened its grip on New York and the warehouse lights dimmed, the snow came down thicker, slower, more deliberate, as if it were taking its time erasing the last sharp edges of violence. Harold Crane emerged first. Two uniformed officers guided him out through the loading doors, their hands firm but not rough. There was no need. Crane had no resistance left to offer. His shoulders sagged, his posture bent inward, as though gravity had suddenly increased around him alone. The briefcase, once clutched like a talisman, had been left behind, its contents now reduced to evidence tags and inventory sheets. For a brief moment, the warehouse lights caught his face, and I saw what remained when ambition had been stripped of context, power, and illusion. Not fury, not outrage, just vacancy, the hollowed look of a man who had spent years manipulating events only to discover, too late, that manipulation has no loyalty. Snow collected on his coat almost immediately, dark fabrics speckled white, each flake clinging stubbornly. It struck me then that this was the first time all night he had truly been visible, exposed, named, claimed by consequence. Behind him came the security chief. He moved more slowly, not because the officers forced him to, but because he seemed reluctant to arrive anywhere at all. His shoulders were slumped now, the rigid alertness of earlier hours drained away. Rage had burned itself out, leaving only exhaustion and something quieter beneath it. Regret, perhaps, or simply the weight of realizing that obedience had not bought absolution. He did not look at Crane. He did not need to. The snow settled on him as well, softening his outline, disguising the angles of a man who had lived by efficiency and control. For a fleeting moment, he looked almost ordinary. That, I thought, was the cruelest trick of all. Saul Panzer stood a few paces away, hands deep in his coat pockets, collar turned up against the cold. His face was calm, as it almost always was, but there was a looseness to his posture that hadn't been there before. The tension that had kept him upright for days, perhaps weeks, had finally released its hold. When the last police car pulled away and the sound of engines faded into the snow, muted distance, Saul reached into his pocket and took out a cigarette. His hand shook. It was slight. Anyone else might not have noticed it, but Saul Panzer does not shake. He is a man who measures risk professionally, who accepts danger as a condition of employment. I had seen him walk into rooms where violence waited impatiently and emerge unchanged. That faint tremor told me more than his words ever could. He struck a match, shielding it carefully from the wind. The flame flared, hesitated, then caught. He drew in a long breath, held it, and released the smoke slowly, as though testing the air. "That's why," he said finally. "Why you didn't like it?" I asked. He nodded. "This one was rotten all the way through." I waited. Saul didn't elaborate unless he meant it. "Too many ghosts," he said at last, "all tied to one man." I glanced back toward the street where the police cars had disappeared. "Crane, yes," Saul said. "Men like that don't just kill people, they use them first. They turn them into instruments, then they discard them when they stop being useful." "You saw it early," I said. "I felt it," Saul replied. "That's usually worse." The snow continued to fall, soft and persistent, muting the city into something almost gentle. The river slid past in the darkness, indifferent and eternal, carrying away reflections of lights and secrets alike. We didn't linger. There was nothing left to say at the warehouse, and Wolfe disliked lingering even more than he disliked warehouses. We returned to West 35th Street separately, each of us wrapped in our own version of the night. The brownstone welcomed us with warmth and familiarity. Fritz had restored order with quiet efficiency. Coats hung, lamps lit, the faint scent of pine and polished wood lingering in the air. The Christmas decorations remained exactly where they had been before the case began, as though they had been patiently waiting for normalcy to return. Wolfe removed his coat with evident satisfaction and settled back into his chair, the one place in the world where he seemed entirely at ease. The bulk of him relaxed, the tension that had occupied the room for days dissolving as completely as if someone had flipped a switch. "Fritz," Wolfe called. "Yes, Herr Wolfe," came the immediate reply. "I am hungry," Wolfe announced. That was how I knew the case was truly finished. Wolfe's appetite is a reliable instrument. When danger approaches, he eats sparingly. When a puzzle remains unresolved, he eats distractedly. But when justice has been achieved, when the pattern has been revealed, and the final piece locked into place, his hunger returns with conviction. Dinner appeared promptly, the product of Fritz's foresight and long experience. Wolfe ate with deliberate pleasure, savoring each bite, the way a man does when the world has once again aligned itself properly. I sat at my desk, jotting down notes I would later shape into something official. Wolfe watched me for a moment, then spoke without looking up. "You are observing me," he said. "Occupational hazard," I replied. Wolfe said, "An irritating one." Saul arrived later, having shaken off the cold and the weight of the night. He paused in the doorway, watching Wolfe eat, and allowed himself a small smile, tired but genuine. "You all right?" I asked him. "Yes," Saul said. "Now I am." He glanced at Wolfe. "You ended it cleanly." "That was unavoidable," Wolfe said. "Given sufficient information, truth tends to assert itself." Saul nodded. Crane thought Christmas would hide him. "Christmas," Wolfe said, "encourages sentimentality. It does not suspend logic." Saul leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "He almost got away with it." "Almost," Wolfe replied, "is a word of great comfort to fools." We sat together in the quiet, the brownstones settling around us, the city outside softened by snow and distance somewhere. Bells rang again, late services perhaps, or simply the echo of celebration lingering past its appointed hour. Saul finished his cigarette at the window, extinguished it carefully, and turned back toward us. "You know," he said, "cases like this don't usually end with relief." "No," Wolfe said. "They end with residue." "But this one didn't," Saul said. Wolfe considered that, then nodded once, "because it was concluded thoroughly." Saul smiled faintly. "That'll do." He left shortly after, his footsteps quiet on the stairs, the door closing softly behind him. I leaned back in my chair and surveyed the office, the books, the desk, the familiar order restored. The case was finished. The house knew it. "Justice survived the holiday," I said. Wolfe dabbed his lips with his napkin. "Justice," he said, "is remarkably durable when properly assisted." Outside, the snow continued its work, smoothing the city into something almost innocent. Tomorrow people would wake, complain about the weather, return unwanted gifts, and resume their ordinary lives. They would not think about Harold Crane, or Victor Hale, or Clara Hemsley, who would wake cleared and alive, or the men whose lives had been consumed by one man's ambition. They would not hear the bells the way we had. And that was all right. The truth had been spoken, the ledger balanced, and in the warm, quiet brownstone on West 35th Street, Nero Wolfe returned to his book, appetite restored, content in the knowledge that even on Christmas night, justice had not taken a holiday. Chapter 12, Wolfe's Christmas silence later that night. Wolfe sat among his orchids, the city quiet at last. Christmas lights flickered like tired stars outside the window. Saul's fear had been justified, but it had also saved lives. Wolfe allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. Danger had arrived, but it hadn't stayed. Christmas night does not end abruptly. It thins, slowly and unevenly, like fog lifting from a river. Sounds withdraw in layers, first laughter, then music, then the last restless footsteps of people who have run out of reasons to stay awake. What remains is a silence that feels earned, rather than imposed. A quiet that settles because it has been invited. By the time I climbed the stairs to the plant rooms, The brownstone had entered that silence. The house was still, but not empty. It breathed. The familiar creaks of wood adjusting to cold, the distant hum of steam in the pipes, the faint ticking of the clock downstairs. All of it formed a private rhythm that belonged to the building as much as to the man who ruled it. Fritz had long since retired, satisfied that no further demands would be made of him. The telephone rested undisturbed, its bell silent at last, as though it too understood that the night's work was finished. Nero Wolfe sat among his orchids. He had changed into his robe, the heavy fabric draped comfortably over his broad frame. The robe was not a symbol of leisure so much as conclusion. Wolfe wore it when nothing further was required of him except thought, and even that only in moderation. The orchids surrounded him in ordered abundance. Row upon row of plants stood in disciplined ranks, each in its assigned place, each leaf glossy and firm, each blossom precise in its geometry. The warm lights above them cast a steady glow, creating a climate entirely removed from snow, gunfire, and the fevered ambitions of men who believed themselves indispensable. Wolfe regarded them with the quiet satisfaction of a craftsman surveying work that had been properly maintained. "They have endured well," he said. I stood in the doorway, careful not to disturb the balance of the room, unlike some people we've encountered. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Plants possess the admirable quality of knowing when to stop growing." He adjusted the angle of a lamp by a fraction of an inch, then leaned back again, hands folded comfortably across his stomach. The movement was precise, economical, without haste. Everything Wolfe did among his orchids had intent, but none of it had urgency. Urgency belonged to danger. Danger, for the moment, had departed. Outside the tall windows, Christmas lights still flickered along the street, strings of bulbs wrapped around lampposts, shop windows glowing, though their owners had long since gone home. Against the snow-darkened night, the lights looked like tired stars, still shining out of habit rather than conviction. "They'll turn them off tomorrow," I said. "Yes," Wolfe replied. "Decorations rarely survive daylight." There was a long, companionable silence. The orchids seemed to approve of it. "Saul was right," I said at last. Wolfe did not look at me. "Saul is frequently right. He said the case frightened him," I went on. "Not because it was complicated, because it was concentrated." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Too many deaths anchored to one intelligence." I nodded. Crane, Wolfe agreed. "A man who mistook orchestration for genius." The name sounded smaller here, diminished by the room, stripped of menace. Among the orchids, Harold Crane was merely a solved equation. "Saul's fear mattered," I said. "If he hadn't trusted it, we would have been reacting rather than anticipating." Wolfe finished. "Yes." That was high praise by Wolfe's standards, though he would never phrase it as such. He reached for a watering can, tested its weight thoughtfully, then decided against using it and set it back down. Even in rest, Wolfe calculated, overwatering ruins orchids as surely as neglect. "Fear," he said, "is not the enemy of reason, it is often its herald." "That's not how most people experience it," I said. "No," Wolfe replied. "Most people allow fear to dictate their behavior. Saul allows it to inform his judgment." I thought of Saul standing at the docks, his movements controlled, his eyes alert, the faint tremor in his hand, when it was finally safe to stop pretending he was unaffected. I thought of the ghosts he had named, not melodramatically, not for effect, but because he had seen them accumulate long before anyone else noticed the pattern. "It saved lives," I said. "Yes," Wolfe said, "including Crane's, regrettable though that may be." "Do you ever regret that?" I asked. "Saving men like him?" Wolfe considered the question seriously, which was more than it deserved. He never dismissed a sincere inquiry, even when the answer seemed obvious to him. "No," he said at last. "Justice is not an instrument of vengeance. It is an instrument of order." "That's a neat distinction," I said. "It must be," Wolfe replied. "Order that indulges vengeance is merely chaos with paperwork." The city outside remained hushed, the snow continuing its slow work of erasure. By morning it would be churned and dirtied and shoveled aside, its brief illusion of purity sacrificed to routine. But for now, it lay untouched, innocent in a way only temporary things can be. Wolfe studied one orchid in particular, its blossoms pale and exact, each petal unfolding according to a pattern older than commerce, older than crime. Danger arrived, he said quietly. Yes, I agreed. But it did not stay. Wolfe concluded. I smiled faintly. That's about as close to contentment as you come. Wolfe allowed himself a small nod. It was almost imperceptible, a fractional dip of the chin, but for Nero Wolfe it was acknowledgement enough. Satisfaction, restrained and disciplined, suited him far better than celebration ever could. The clock downstairs chimed softly, marking the late hour. Somewhere far off, a final bell rang, perhaps a church concluding its last service, perhaps merely the echo of a celebration reluctant to end. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again, the reflection of orchids faintly visible in his gaze. Christmas, he said, has been adequately observed. I took that as dismissal. As I left the plant room and descended the stairs, the quiet settled more firmly around the house. The case was finished. The danger had passed through and been expelled, leaving behind only memory, paperwork, and the faintest residue of unease that always follows close contact with human ambition. Outside, the lights continued to flicker. Inside, Nero Wolfe sat among his orchids, content in the knowledge that order, once disturbed, had been restored. For one night, that was enough. And for Christmas, it was more than most people ever receive.